All right. So today we're going to be talking about some pretty interesting stuff. First of all, should state the obvious, and that is that we have a guest on our show, Matt Cromwell from GiveWP Word and Press.
Hi, Matt.
And yeah, so you're based in San Diego, right, Matt?
Yep.
San Diego, yay. And this is our first time doing something quite like this, where we're bringing someone in who isn't live, with us in person. And so we're experimenting a little bit with our setup and things like that, so I apologize if there are any issues with audio or video, but I think we should be good to go. So today, do you want to introduce the topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So we are talking about, well, the title was, how much is that PayPal button costing you? Which is just a way of introducing the topic, which is your own personally branded giving page for a nonprofit versus a third-party page or tool, like whether that's something like a PayPal button or even a platform like GoFundMe, one of those tools. So basically your own site and your own presence versus a third-party tool. And what are the benefits and the pros and cons of that?
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, we'll be talking about a number of different things, but primarily, one thing that I wanted to be sure that we mention is that Matt over at GiveWP, Word and Press, the Give donation plugin for WordPress currently, I like to say it has 19,999 active users.
Oh, that's why you say that.
Unfortunately, WordPress statistics don't give us exact numbers, but I think that's pretty close. Over 100,000 downloads. So to say that you have some hands-on experience with donation tools would be kind of an understatement. So we're really we're really sort of glad to have you on the show today to also bring your expertise to this topic, as well as our own expertise in working with nonprofits and donation platforms and that sort of thing as well. So.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
So let's dig in to this topic a little bit. And by the way, anybody who's watching, please feel free to post questions. We'll do our best to answer them as we go along.
Yes, we love that.
If not, and you are watching this after the show, then you can still post questions, and we'll try to follow up with answers.
Hi, Bridget.
But live is always better. So.
Yes.
So
Good.
the first thing I think that would be a great thing to sort of talk about is, I guess there's sort of three different things that we can sort of talk about. The first one that I see a lot is where nonprofits are just getting started. Maybe they set up a site on Squarespace or on WordPress or something like that, and they've had the experience where the donation aspect is sort of an afterthought, where it's like, okay, we built this website with this website building tool, and now we should figure out a way to collect donations. And so the most common thing that we see is, oh, well, we'll just tack on a PayPal button, or we'll just tack on, a link to some third-party giving platform. Mm-hmm. And so the user's experience is they come to the website, they see and learn about the organization, and what we've seen in our experiences, the donation page is typically the third most popular page on the site. The second,
awesome.
Right? So the second most popular page is the About page, because people want to learn about the organization, right? So when they click that donation page, what happens from there is sort of a big deal. What have you seen in that regard, Matt?
In regard to the popularity of the donation page?
Yeah, and users' experience with that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the popularity of the donation page, I think, depends largely on how well you implement your donation page. Some people, often, it's an afterthought. One thing we like to tell people often is build from the donation page out.
Nice.
I mean, we like start there and build the rest of the site out from there. Just because if the intention of your site is to get donations, then that should be a primary focus. But sometimes it's an afterthought. Like you said, people are like, well, let's just throw something simple on there to get money. And if they do that, then sometimes they can't even find the donation page well. It's like tucked in a submenu under the About or something like that. So the popularity of it, for me, I think depends a lot on how well they implement the site.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Definitely.
Yeah, I know that.
What I've seen, and I mean, people like to give, but they also like to have that experience of having a reason to give, and they have to feel compelled to do so. One of the things that we've seen is that a lot of times when people click that donation button for the first time to navigate to the page, they're not committed yet to giving.
Right.
So at that point, they're curious, they're interested, and when they click on it, if they go to a completely separate site, completely separate page, it's just startling. I mean, it's just, their abandonment rate at that point is so high. What we've seen is
70%.
that abandonment rate can be up to 70% depending on the situation. Because think about it, somebody comes to your site, they're invested in learning about who you are as an organization, they click donate to explore, and all of a sudden I'm faced with a PayPal page, I'm faced with GoFundMe or some other tool. All of a sudden you've lost a chance to re-engage them, to tell them more about your mission, tell them why they should give. All of that goes away.
Right. It's usually just a start page with a PayPal button and maybe one other way to give. And as you were just saying, they often don't come to that page ready to basically open their checkbook, ready to hit click and give. They often come to that page to find out more about why they should give, and they want to hear the story. They want to hear how their donation will impact the organization. They really want to continue to follow your brand. And if it's sort of a start cutoff, like you said, it's startling, and they might just close the browser window.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what a lot of organizations, I think, do have this sense of, oh, of course it would be nice to have a donation page that's branded, that re-engages, that tells our story, that tells people why they should give and makes a connection between the amount they give to the impact. But a lot of people are like, we couldn't afford that. That would be great for Red Cross or somebody who has a multi-million-dollar budget for fundraising. But for somebody like us, that's just not viable. It's not a option.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like I've read some of some customer feedback, some reviews. Has that been kind of? Have you seen a lot of people with that sort of mentality, Matt?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest hurdle for a lot of folks is just simply the technical hurdle. That there is a technical hurdle in terms of needing to or understanding that you need if you're going to collect donations on your website directly with a credit card payment gateway, then you're going to need an SSL certificate. Sometimes very beginning users. Oftentimes with our plugin, like for example, you guys build nonprofit sites, and you know how to do it, and it's going to be great, and you know how best practices work, and you go into with the client with those things in mind right away, and that's definitely the best way to go. But sometimes for our plugin users, sometimes they're like a secretary of a church. They're like, we need donations, and nobody knows how to do it, so they're just like, let's just make something happen. And honestly, the PayPal standard, the way that you can bounce them over to PayPal, like that's basically the lowest point of entry of making it happen. And that is the way in which PayPal can be convenient, is giving people the ability to collect donations, even though it's really not the best way to do it. At least they can do it. They went from 0 to something.
Right.
So there are benefits there, but in general, once you start digging into it, you see you need to install an SSL certificate. You need to learn how to add a payment gateway into whatever plugin you might be using with Give. We try to make it as easy as possible, but there's still like API keys you have to find in your payment gateway. There's some technical hurdles for folks who are just starting with WordPress or who don't understand WordPress or web development very well in general. But overall, we help them as much as possible, and we think the benefits outweigh the trouble.
Well, so I would even step back from that a little bit and say that the process to do this with something like Give is 1,000 times easier than anyone would expect for it to be. I've seen plenty of situations where, and like even relatively large organizations where donations are, trying to be handled as a product in a store and things like that. And it's just a very cumbersome process. For me, the Give plugin as a prime example with WordPress is something that you can install. You can literally get your Give donation form set up in, for me, it's like 5 minutes. For someone else, it might be 20 or 30 minutes. And you can place it anywhere on your site, on any page, on any, sidebar or whatever. The settings part of it is a little bit more involved, signing up for a payment gateway or using PayPal or something like that. But really, the ability that it gives you to take a design page and drop a giving form right in the page is just huge. It's extremely powerful.
I appreciate that.
Well,
they try hard to make it so.
Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable. And when you have something like that, you're able to tell your story along with the call to action to give. So it's very easy for you to build your page, telling the story and creating a compelling message, doing things that you're used to doing, and have the giving call to action be part of that, just natively. It feels right in the fabric of it. So I think that's something that even though you have 19,999 active installs, there are millions more that don't know about this tool, or frankly, I'm not sure if there are other tools like it. For WordPress, I think for sure it stands apart.
Thanks.
So yeah. So what we've seen, so back to this whole conversation of why. So what we've actually seen in looking at some case studies and looking at statistics is there are two audiences that people often target with online giving. One is their sort of traditional donor audience, which is, maybe a demographic that's pretty broad, but maybe like, let's say, 35, 40 up to, senior. And so that audience has a very wide variety of technical ability and all that kind of thing. For them, having something that's native, something that's embedded right in the page that feels easy to use is important, because you want them to be able to feel like they trust it, feel like they understand it, and they can do it, easily. There's another demographic that's the emerging sort of donor audience, which is this, millennial and younger demographic of users. For them, it's a trust issue. For them, if they see that URL change, or if they see the branding change on the page, all of a sudden this could be phishing, this could be a scam or something like that. Whereas, and if they see that, they're going to X off the page and away they go. So between those two audiences, what we've actually seen is that in some cases, sending someone to a third-party donation page where it's not branded, where it's not on your own website and all that, can result in up to a 70% bounce rate, which is huge.
If you do the math with how many donations you're losing, if you're only getting 30% of your donations, you're losing 70%. That's a pretty big cost right there, and we're not even talking about the processing fees or whatever that PayPal might take, or that another
Platform.
Platform might take. So that's a pretty big cost.
And on top of that, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because you see that cost and you're like, okay, that's but realize that when people become engaged in your organization, they become repeat donors, and you have a chance to lead them down the funnel of engagement. As when they bounce away from your site, your chance of them coming back is almost zero. So
Right. So the chance to, after they give, to
Yep.
re-engage and say thank you, and would you like to sign up for something or attend this event or.
Yep. So your long-term, audience becomes narrower and narrower, from that perspective. What we've seen in contrast is with on-site branded donation pages in certain case studies, that percentage went from 70% bounce rate down to below 5%,
Wow.
which is it's almost unbelievable to think about. And those aren't necessarily averages, or not necessarily, statistics from broad studies, but this is what can be achieved just by changing your technique of how you present your donation tools.
Right. So it's worth either figuring it out yourself or maybe hiring someone or asking or begging someone. Beg, borrow, or steal a branded donation page.
I mean, one thing that I think would be worth mentioning here is that, we're talking about WordPress. There are other platforms definitely that, if other people are using other platforms and have questions, definitely post them in the comments and it'd be great to talk about. One thing that is worth mentioning is if you are using WordPress, there is a group called WordPress for Nonprofits. So if you're in a position of beg, borrowing, and stealing, that would be a great place to reach out with questions or other things like that, I would say.
I was just
Facebook
checking
group.
comments.
Yeah.
I was trying to look. I've not seen them for some reason. The comments on the video. Yeah.
Yep.
Check to see.
So I'd be interested in hearing, I saw an article recently, Matt, that sort of compared a quote-unquote no-fee solution like Give, where basically the only fees are whatever your payment gateway charges, to a platform solution like, let's say, GoFundMe, or I guess that would be a primary one that's used, or even we could even broaden this and say for nonprofits, they may even be looking at other solutions like Classy or something like that. What do you have to say about that? Even just from a accounting numbers standpoint, I've seen some interesting variations in numbers.
Yeah. That's one thing that we spent a lot of time looking into. The great thing about WordPress is basically that you get to own your own site. You don't have to share it with another party, basically. So even like if you think about something like Squarespace, a lot of folks will use Squarespace to be their website builder of choice or whatnot. Squarespace isn't like a host. They're a service to help you build a website. But then what happens is as soon as you build that site out, if you are taking information from your readers or from your donors, then all that information is shared then with Squarespace. We like to say that Give does the same thing for your donors that WordPress does with your users. That we enable you to own your own data, own your own donation data, and not share that with a third party. When you're thinking about how important, like Marissa was saying earlier about the issue of trust, your donors want to know that when they're giving you your information that you're trustworthy. And so basically, I'm not trying to say that using these third-party systems is bad. I just think not sharing that information is better, especially when it comes to being a nonprofit and the donation data. So on the biggest issue for me is the ability to own your own data. But then the second issue is one that you were alluding to, I think, is that those third-party platforms, they have to have money in order to keep their lights on in one way or another. And the most common way in which they get money is basically taking a portion of your donations. And they have to pay a payment gateway as well. So they're going to be charged according to the payment gateway that they use. And maybe they have a negotiated rate so that they have a lot smaller payment gateway rate than you would. But then they're going to tack on their fees on top of that. So, for example, with PayPal, They typically charge 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. And then the third-party platform is going to charge a fee on top of that. So per donation, you might end up having, for example, maybe 5% taken off of each donation, or up to, with some platforms. Sorry, I got a little bit of background noise. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. With some platforms, it could be up to 8%. So you could be basically giving away up to 8% of your donation per donation, basically. We have an article on our website about that, specifically with GoFundMe. We just ran the numbers, and basically, if you did one campaign that was $10,000 total with GoFundMe, you'd end up, based on their rates that they say publicly on their website, you'd end up with about $9,100 instead of the $10,000. And with us, it'd be a lot more. It'd be about $9,800. So just with one $10,000 campaign, you basically earn about between $600 and $700 more just by owning your own data, by doing the fundraising on your own site instead of a third-party system.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Matt. So just to clarify, the sort of 2.9% that PayPal takes plus 30 cents, that's kind of across the board. That's every solution that you use, you're going to have that fee. But then you're also, in addition, talking about the platform itself is taking, a 5 or an 8 or a 10%.
Yeah, on top of that.
On top of that. Right, so we can't get away from the PayPal fees, unfortunately.
No,
Pay by check.
You can have lower fees for
Right.
nonprofits though, so it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
You can usually get them down sometimes to like 2.2% or 2.1.
Okay.
And if you are a nonprofit that has a large donation base, then they're even more flexible, basically.
Nice.
And same thing with other ones, with Authorize.net, for example. They're very open to negotiating that rate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
good to know.
that's just on the same topic a little bit. So when you look at something, even let's say like Classy, which is primarily more of a crowdfunding thing, but some people use it also just for regular fundraising. We talked to someone last week on a nonprofit chat, Jeff Porter, who had used a solution like that, and the fees for something like that, like you said, are like 7%. They ended up building their own solution, which was open source as well, and worked with Civi CRM, I believe. And similarly to this, I mean, they went from raising $250,000 a year on average up to over $2 million a year in the course of a few years. When you look at that percentage, that adds up tremendously fast.
Mm-hmm.
That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah.
Too, like a lot of nonprofits, they have to report on how all of their donations are spent. That's my partner Jason back there being a fool.
Hi, Jason.
A lot of fun. Nonprofits have a board that they're accountable to, and they have to report on how much donations they're getting all the time, and how that donation money is spent. And some really, really large, I won't name names, but really, really large medical nonprofits, national groups got in a lot of trouble because of the way that when you give $100, only 25 of that is actually going to the cause, and like 75% of it is going to administrative costs. And sometimes these big fat salaries and whatnot. But so admin cost is, a kind of a funny term that sometimes can just apply to payment gateway costs, or the cost of your donation solution. So when all of a sudden the donors know that, when I give this $10, only eight of it is going to go to where I want it to go, or 7 or 6 or 5 of it is going to go where I want it to go, that starts to lose their trust again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you talk about something like GoFundMe, what I've heard a lot of, and I've had a few experiences myself with some sort of crowdfunding campaigns, and I have some war stories, I guess, to talk about with that. But what you hear a lot of is people say, oh, we would use GoFundMe more because people trust it, or we think that because we're using GoFundMe that random people are going to give us money. Whereas if we use something on our website, it may not happen, at that level. I know from my experience, that's not been the case, but it'd be interesting to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue of trust, especially nowadays, it's more and more the case where I'm going to trust you a lot more if you're doing things correctly and doing things yourself. If you're farming it out to somebody else, that's where the trust gets put into question. So when I do see, especially like an organization that wants a significant sum of money to do something, if they are bouncing their donors off somewhere else, I do tend to lose trust. It feels to me more like they are not prioritizing their donor experience very well. They're not prioritizing their website experience very much, and they're trusting my information to somebody else. So I think the trust issue is not quite there. But when it comes to that you'll get more exposure or whatnot through those channels, I think there's only a very small amount of campaigns on those channels that actually do benefit largely by a random donor. It's not that the majority of those campaigns get a ton of people to fund them just because you happen to have a page there.
Yeah.
Basically, the types of campaigns that do really well there are the viral type campaigns. The campaign is like, we're doing something amazing and groundbreaking and everybody loves it, and you want to share it with all your friends because you want to see it happen. Especially when it's something like, like Hurricane Katrina, like anything that's like a gigantic, significant event that everybody agrees is terrible and needs a lot of support, put that quickly up on GoFundMe or Foxy, and that will take off and do really, really well there. But your run-of-the-mill average Joe Schmo nonprofit or even individual, they're not going to really benefit from that. Random donors aren't just sitting there waiting to see that you need money to help your local homeless folks, basically.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I ran, I guess, 3 different quote unquote crowdfunding campaigns. The first one I did was with the assumption that there were random people out there who really would be interested in what I was doing. I was very disappointed by that, unfortunately. So the key the key seemed to be that I needed to at least start that ball rolling by generating interest and things like that. And really the key was that sharing tools be made available, that compelling content be generated, which none of that had anything to do with the platform. It all had to do with the amount of effort I put into the campaign. And I've seen several others that have been similarly successful off of these sort of platforms just because people put the effort into making them successful. So.
Yeah. There's lots of stories out there too about, it's a kind of a tangent type of campaign, but Kickstarter is wildly popular for kickstarting big products and projects and whatnot. And if you read about what makes a successful Kickstarter campaign, it's typically about all the work they put into it before they even started their Kickstarter page.
Yeah.
All the time that they spend creating basically a spec for what the project is, creating like really high-end videos, getting the word out before the Kickstarter even starts. And then once it finally launches, there's already a bunch of people already interested and waiting for it to launch. That's very often the case, and that just shows that those types of things require a ton of work and a lot of preparation before it's even available.
Yeah. And with nonprofits, I've talked to a few sort of fundraising experts, and what I've heard from them is that when you do a major, say, capital campaign or something like that, they don't even announce the campaign unless they have 40 or 50% of the funds committed up front. And so they've done all the legwork ahead of time to get that momentum.
That was definitely a big eye opener for me, because I've definitely done the opposite, and like, with my own little plans and campaigns. Announced it when I'm at 0%, and then I was like, gee, how do these people do this? Like, how do they get to 50% in a day? They don't.
Well,
on the other hand, honestly, we have a couple on our site. We have a section called Give Stories. We have a couple of Give Stories that are really powerful, and they are folks, individuals really, who started at zero, but they happen to have strong networks around them, and when a need arose for them personally, those networks were able to jump in quickly and help them achieve their goals. I mean, their goals were small in comparison. The largest one was a friend of ours who needed to suddenly adopt a child, and he needed around $12,000 within the span of 7 days, and he was able to raise that in just 2 days.
Jesse,
but it was largely because of how strong of a network he had around him. So the 0 to 100% can definitely happen, but it doesn't happen just out of nowhere, and it's not like a magic formula based on your platform.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it has more to do with the investments that you've made in other people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, like, our product is a donation form, and as much as I'd love to say, use our donation form and everything will be awesome, like, that's actually not really the case. What I say most often is, getting donors, 90% of the work you're going to do to get all those donations is going to happen before they even land on our donation page. 90% of everything you need to do to get a lot of donations is going to happen outside of our plugin. Our job is to get out of the way. Is that by the time that 90% of work pays off and they actually land there, it's like seamless. It's like it just happens, and the donors don't have any problems, and the money can flow through easily. So in some ways, a great result is that Give is as invisible as possible by the end of the day.
Absolutely. Makes
That's
a lot
an
of sense.
awesome story too.
So it is, yeah. So I think we're at the end of our time, so we need to wrap it up. But I really appreciate you joining us today, Matt. And for those of you who are able to tune in, we will be making an edited version of this available after the show, probably the next day or two, that you can share with your friends, family, nonprofit pals.
Next week.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So next week, or are we?
Let's actually talk about it after. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Want to make sure you wrap up.
Yes, but thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yes, thanks,
Yeah,
Matt.
absolutely.
All right. Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.